Learning how to make pasta is something that I think everyone can do. It's really straightforward. You take flour, you take water, you knead it together, then you let it rest. You roll it out as thin as you can, and then you cook it.
Let's spend time with Marco, but the food is the star, so it's probably worth sharing.
Hello, my name's Marco, and welcome to my home kitchen. Today I want to show you one of my absolute favorite recipes. It is 18 egg yolk pasta. And this is something that is perfect to make for the people that you love, your family, your friends, yourself. It's a really just delicious, comforting meal when you're feeling down, and you can turn it into so many wonderful things. Dishes like cacio e pepe, pasta aglio e olio, brown butter fried sage. Probably the thing I use it most for is to make lasagna for my friends when they're going through a tough time. I make a dish called the lasagna of sadness, and the fresh pasta is one of those ways of really kind of putting the love you feel for that person into the food, and because it sounds so ridiculous, it can't help but make them feel better. The ingredients here are really simple. You have flour and you have eggs. So the quality of ingredients you buy has a really large impact on the final flavor of the pasta. A lot of recipes call for 0-0 flour. That means the flour is milled really fine until it's like a powder. That allows it to hold more water, which gets you a softer, silkier dough. That will change how the pasta feels, but it won't necessarily change how it tastes. This is all-purpose flour. The eggs matter more. This recipe is about 50% egg yolk, and the flavor of the egg yolk really comes from the life the chicken gets to live. If a chicken gets to act like a chicken, it's going to taste more like a chicken. So these I bought from a local regenerative farm where I've met the farmers. I actually bought these directly from the farmers, and they're a little more expensive. They're 75 cents an egg instead of 25 cents an egg. But this means the farmers get to live a sustainable lifestyle, and the chickens get to go outside whenever they want. They're not cooped up close together like in that scary New York Times documentary. If you can afford it and you have access to it, I would highly recommend that you prioritize better quality eggs, especially if you're choosing between better eggs or better flour. With all that said, let's break some eggs. This recipe needs 18 egg yolks, so you're gonna be separating eggs out for a while. And there's a lot of different methods you can do, but I want to show you one that is just predictable. You need 3 bowls for this process. 1 for your egg yolks, 1 for your egg whites, and 1 to crack your eggs into. So grab an egg, crack it in the bowl, scoop out the egg yolk in one bowl, egg white in another bowl. Now you do this 18 times. Now that the eggs are separated, you can use your egg whites for a ton of things like meringue or angel food cake, macaron, omelets, frittatas. Egg whites are delicious. Odds are you're going to break an egg yolk. If you end up with egg yolk in your bowl, one of the things you can do is use an egg shell as a scoop because the egg yolk is attracted to the shell. And that's going to guarantee that your egg white stays clean. But if you're not able to do that, just put this one in a separate bowl and use it for an omelet. Now that the eggs are separated, it's time to make the dough. The first thing you do is weigh out your eggs. I have about 300 grams of egg yolks. I want to add 20% more than that in weight of flour. So I need 360 grams of flour. I'm going to assemble this on the counter. If you're not feeling brave enough to do that on the counter, you can totally do this in a bowl up until the dough starts forming, and then you're going to knead it on the counter. You also will need a bench scraper and a fork. The first thing to do is pour your flour out into a pile on the center of the counter, and then use the bottom of your bowl to make a well that's the size of your volume of egg yolks. Make sure there's an even layer of flour at the bottom. Add in your egg yolks, your olive oil, and your salt. Now that everything is in the well, it becomes the questionable practice of how do you mix this without making a mess. And you start by poking all of your egg yolks to pop them. You want this to become a paste. So you're going to slowly bring in flour from the sides of the walls. Mix in that little bit of flour at a time until it disappears. This will thicken the egg mixture until it gets to a point where you can switch to the bench scraper. So you slowly bring in flour from the side walls and stir until that gets mixed in. If at any point you break the walls, you can just very quickly use your bench scraper to push everything back into place. So you'll see at this point, the dough is starting to come together and my fork is no longer cutting it. Once you switch to the bench scraper, you're kind of doing a folding and cutting motion to introduce all of the flour to the egg mixture. So you'll see I'm folding the flour over and then cutting with the bench scraper. Because this is such a dry dough, I would not do this in a stand mixer. It's not going to come together. You can really only do this by hand. Once it gets to this stage where you can't really change the texture anymore using just the bench scraper, you want to switch to your hands and start kneading the dough. And you want to knead it for 10 minutes. So I'm going to start putting this together here. Because it's a dry dough, you're probably going to start this process questioning my sanity and saying, this dough will never come together. This is so difficult. And why would you do this to me? And then when you get to the part where you're actually like rolling out pasta, it'll make sense. And you need to resist the temptation to add more water. If you use up all of the flour on your surface, you might want to add more flour. And if at the end of this you have too much flour, you just want to push that off to the side. So I'm just gonna scrape these little dry bits away because they're not gonna mix in very well. And I'll keep kneading this dough. In terms of a method for kneading, you can use whichever one you're comfortable with. You're gonna be here for like 10 minutes. I personally use both hands. I am pushing out with the heel of my left hand and then using my thumb of my right hand to rotate and fold the dough over. That's what I find is effective for me, but your mileage might vary. As you go through the kneading process, the texture of the dough is going to start changing pretty dramatically. Where this began dry and crumbly, you'll see it's now actually quite a bit like Play-Doh. If it gets too hard for you to knead, you can wrap it in plastic and leave it for 5 minutes, and that's going to help the gluten relax, and it'll be a bit softer when you come back to it. Usually when I'm making pasta, I'm making it for someone specifically, and I find this time is really meditative and a good time to just kind of reflect on my relationship with that person, really question why I'm doing this. Especially as you get to like the 8-minute mark. I am now approaching the arms falling off stage of the mixing process. Do they deserve pasta? I thought they did. It's been 10 minutes and the dough has stopped changing. What I mean by that is there's no longer kind of like dry spots. Feels like the same texture throughout. You'll see there's a bit of this dappled surface on top. That's normal because this is a very dry dough. Oh no. Oh no. Once the dough is wrapped, you can leave it at room temperature for 30 minutes to 2 hours. If you're planning to make your dough ahead of time, you can, but there's a catch. The outside of the dough is going to oxidize, and that means it's going to look like a grayish brown color that you're going to think it's gone bad overnight. It hasn't. It still tastes exactly the same. Once you run it through your pasta machine, it's going to become this beautiful yellow color again, but that's something to be aware of in case you are planning to make this in advance. So the dough is rested, I am rested, and it's time to turn it from pasta dough into pasta noodles. And to do that, I'm going to use this hand-cranked pasta machine. This is a fancy one that I just got, but I've been using this one for the past 10 years. It was $30. So an entry-level one is really good, especially if you're not sure if you're going to like the process. The other thing you can do is borrow a pasta machine from a friend who has one. For any of my friends watching, you can borrow that one. I wouldn't recommend doing it with a rolling pin for your first time making pasta. It's not going to be a fun experience, and in particular, because this is a very dry dough, it's not going to work very well. You want to make sure you have a few other things out for the rest of this process. So I'm going to use my bench scraper to divide the dough. I need some flour to dust the pasta after it's sliced. And you might need some clean kitchen towels to separate out all of your layers, particularly if you're making something like lasagna noodles. Let's get rolling. The first thing you want to do here is cut out about 1/4 of your dough. And then leave the rest of it wrapped so it doesn't dry out as you're working through the rest of this process. You want to get started by making this relatively flat, which you can do either with your hands or with a rolling pin. The first thing to do is go through the pasta machine on the thickest setting. In this case, the thickest setting is called 0, but on my old machine, the thickest setting was actually number 7. Once you've rolled it through for the first time, there's a process here called laminating the dough. You're going to fold it back into thirds, and you want it to be 1 finger width less than the width of the pasta machine before you put it through again. This process of laminating helps add strength to the dough, and it's going to make it a lot easier to roll out. You'll see here I have this weird little shape at the end that happens quite often. If you cut that off now, you will end up with a much straighter piece as you continue rolling it through. That was on setting 0. I've now moved on to setting 1, setting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is setting 7. And when your noodle gets really long, you can cut it in half to make it a lot more manageable. It takes practice to figure out how thick you want the pasta to be, but a really good best practice is if you can see a pattern through it, in this case on this kitchen towel. This is a great thickness for papardelle, tagliatelle. If I was going to make lasagna, I want it paper thin, so I'd go 1 or 2 stages further than this. You want to imagine how much water the pasta is going to absorb, so it's going to become quite a bit thicker than it is right now, probably 2 or 3 times as thick. When you have your sheets rolled out, now you want to very lightly dust it with flour. This just prevents it from sticking to itself. And then cut it to the width that you are planning to eat your noodles. If you're making this for lasagna, I would actually measure the lasagna pan and make it that length. These are going to rest on the baking sheet. I'm going to continue rolling out the pasta. There's absolutely no reason to make a noodle this long other than you can and it's fun, but you can make them smaller. Take this thing away. Get out your cutting board, favorite knife. To cut your noodles by hand, you might want to clean up the edges. So you can stack a couple of pieces. I've got 4 pieces here. And quickly cut these to be straight edged at the top and bottom. Then roll or fold your noodles into something smaller than the size of your knife blade. Cut off the left and right sides, and then cut your noodles to your desired thickness and shake them out. You'll want to toss these with a little bit of flour just to make sure they're not going to stick together. And keep on cutting. So that's all of the pasta cut into noodles. Now you can use this immediately or you can store it for later. If you're going to store it for later, because there is so much egg in this, you don't necessarily want to dry it out at room temperature. There's a risk of salmonella. So put it in your oven at the lowest temperature it goes until it feels dry. What I prefer to do is to put this in the freezer. I would put it on a baking sheet like this, uncovered, let it freeze solid, and then put it inside of a Ziploc bag. I'm going to turn this into a quick lunch with pasta aglio e olio, olive oil and garlic pasta. It's really simple. You've got olive oil, you've got garlic, Parmesan, some parsley, salt and pepper. It will come together pretty quickly. To start, you need a 1/4 cup of oil on a cold pan. And to that, you're going to add 6 thinly sliced cloves of garlic. I'm definitely one of those people that takes garlic as a suggestion. So this one has 7 cloves in it, and I am using all 7, and I am not sorry. I love garlic. I grow garlic. I didn't last year because I was doing this kitchen reno. So you can get sweet garlic, you can get spicy garlic. There's really pretty, like deeply purple kinds of garlic. It's so much fun. This is really all the sauce is. So this is just gonna cook really slowly. And while that happens, I'm going to try to get water to boil. This recipe calls for about a cup of grated Parmesan. I feel like Parmesan quantities are also a suggestion, but it's like a minimum suggestion, because in this case you do need it to emulsify the sauce. This is about a 1/4 cup of chopped parsley. You want the garlic to very slowly and gently become golden. That'll keep out any of like the harsh bitter flavors. So what you're seeing here looks really good. And I'm going to throw in some black pepper. So the black pepper has a chance to bloom in the olive oil as well. Now I'm gonna throw in the noodles. Even though there's salt in the pasta, you still want to salt your water like normal. And then drop the pasta in. Obviously, you would want to use much more water than this, but I'm working with very limited kitchen appliances right now. It's been about a minute. The pasta is going to finish cooking in the sauce. I'm going to take it over with this spider strainer, which is also going to bring over some of that really starchy pasta water. And that's also going to help emulsify the sauce. You want to add the Parmesan cheese in just a little bit at a time to help it start getting familiar with the rest of the components, slowly melt. And then if you need to thin it out a little bit, grab a little bit of pasta water and pour that in. It's going to thicken as it cools, so you want to make sure it's nice and saucy and glossy. That's looking great. I'm going to throw in the parsley. And this is ready to eat. I'm just going to toss it on this plate here for serving. So just finish this with some Parmesan, some more parsley, some more black pepper. And this is a great way to serve this family style at the table. Everyone can kind of take how much they want from this very large platter. I'm here alone, so I'm just going to try it out. The smell of the garlic with the Parmesan, and it's just amazing. Mm. 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 It's so good. The noodles are so silky. They have this like deep, eggy flavor. They have a great chew. The garlic and the Parmesan and the black pepper are just like coming together. It's so good. I can't believe how simple it is for how amazing it tastes. This is such a special meal to make, and I think it's something that you will truly love. I hope you try this out. It's a great skill to develop that you're going to have for the rest of your life. It is a gift to give to the people you love And I hope that list also includes yourself. You should totally make this for yourself and freeze the individual portions for weeknight meals. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned something new, please like and subscribe. It truly does mean a lot. And I will see you in the next video. Talk to you soon.
It's probably worth sharing.
I'm gonna eat some pasta.